Drop the knife. Now, step away from the wall.
This is a hardness pick. I'm the director of city planning. You're interrupting a sanctioned inspection.
I don't care who you say you are. You're damaging public property.
My credentials are in my blazer. There's a permit on that fence. You're making a serious mistake.
Hands behind your back. Stop resisting.
I am not.
The body camera footage didn't just end a career. It exposed the rotting foundation of an entire precinct. And Officer Kyle Miller had absolutely no idea that the woman he was accusing of vandalism had actually written the city zoning code he was currently standing on. The woman scraping a specialized metal tool against the brick facade of the 19th century library wasn't a vandal. She wasn't a vagrant. She was Dr. Althea Gibson, the director of city planning, a woman with a PhD in urban development and the authority to shut down construction projects across the entire metro area. But Officer Miller didn't see a doctorate. He didn't see the safety vest hanging neatly over her tailored suit. He saw a black woman in a historic district with a sharp object, and he decided right then and there to ruin his own life. Before we unravel this catastrophic failure of police judgment, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your country, your state, wherever you are. And if you believe that competence should be respected and authority figures held accountable, hit that subscribe button. You are not going to believe how this unfolds. Dr. Althea Gibson was a woman of precision. At 58 years old, she moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had spent decades navigating the halls of municipal power. She didn't rush. She didn't guess. She assessed. On this particular Tuesday morning, the sun was casting long, sharp shadows across the revitalization project in the historic district. The air was crisp, filled with the distant hum of traffic and the nearer sounds of a city waking up to commerce. Althea was standing before the old stone library, a building she had personally fought to save from demolition 3 years prior. She was holding a Mohs hardness pick, a specialized geological tool used to test mortar consistency. She was checking the contractor's work, ensuring they hadn't used a modern cement that would suffocate the historic soft brick. It was a technical, precise task that required focus. She heard the crunch of boots on gravel behind her. She didn't turn immediately. She finished her stroke, noting the way the lime mortar dusted off perfect consistency. Only then did she pivot, expecting to see her foreman Jim returning from his coffee run. Instead, she found herself facing a uniform. Officer Kyle Miller was 27 years old with a high and tight haircut and a posture that screamed he was looking for action in a quiet neighborhood. He had been on the force for 4 years, long enough to be confident, but not long enough to be wise. His hand was resting near his holster, his thumbs hooked into his duty belt. He wasn't smiling. "Ma'am, put the knife down," Miller commanded. His voice wasn't asking, it was ordering. He stood about 10 feet away, blading his body slightly, a tactical stance taught in the academy for confronting suspects. Althea blinked, her mind shifting gears from architectural preservation to crisis management. She looked at the small silver tool in her hand, a blunt-nosed instrument no longer than a pen, and then back at the officer. She didn't drop it. She didn't panic. She simply held it out flat on her palm to show it wasn't a weapon. "Good morning, officer," Althea said, her voice possessing that distinct resonant timbre of a woman accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "This isn't a knife, it's a hardness pick. I'm testing the mortar joints." She spoke clearly, articulating every syllable. She knew statistically how dangerous this situation could be. She knew that a 58-year-old grandmother with a PhD could still be seen as a threat if the sun hit the wrong way or an officer's bias was running high. Miller took a step forward. "I didn't ask you what it was. I told you to put it down. You're defacing public property." He gestured to the wall she had been inspecting. To an untrained eye, the small pile of dust on the ground might look like damage. To Althea, it was evidence of preservation. "Officer, I am the director of city planning. This is a city-sanctioned inspection of a Class A historic landmark. I have my credentials in my blazer pocket." Miller scoffed, a short, sharp sound of dismissal. "Director of city planning, right? And I'm the mayor. Drop the weapon and step away from the wall, or I will help you step away." He was already closing the distance, his patience evaporating. He had decided on the narrative, a disturbed individual damaging the library. He wasn't interested in editing the script. Althea felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She realized with terrifying clarity that he wasn't listening. He was hunting. "Officer," Althea said, keeping her hands visible, the tool now placed gently on the ledge of the window she was inspecting. "My name is Dr. Althea Gibson. If you check the permit posted on the construction fence 10 feet to your right, you will see my signature at the bottom. I am authorized to be here. I am authorized to touch this building. You are making a significant error." Miller didn't look at the fence. He didn't look at the permit. He looked at Althea's face and he saw defiance where he should have seen authority. "Hands! Now!" he barked, reaching for his radio with his left hand while his right hand hovered over his taser. "Dispatch, I've got a female subject, 1094, refusing lawful orders, active vandalism in progress at the old library." "Vandalism," Althea repeated, her tone sharpening. "I am verifying compliance with Municipal Code 14.02. This is a $5 million renovation project funded by the very taxpayers who pay your salary. You are interrupting a municipal audit." "You can tell it to the judge," Miller snapped. He moved in, grabbing Althea's left arm. He didn't ask for her ID again. He didn't check the permit. He seized her. The grip was tight, bordering on painful. Althea was a woman of dignity. She had shaken hands with governors. She had dined with senators. And now a man young enough to be her grandson was manhandling her in the middle of the street she helped design. "Officer, stop," Althea said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "You are currently detaining a senior city official without reasonable suspicion. The tool is on the ledge. I am unarmed. I am identifying myself. If you put handcuffs on me, you will be violating department policy on discretion and probable cause, and you will be initiating a chain of events you cannot stop." "Stop resisting," Miller yelled, playing to an audience that wasn't there yet, though a few pedestrians were starting to stop on the sidewalk across the street. He twisted her arm behind her back. Althea winced, but didn't pull away. She knew the drill. Pulling away was resisting. Flinching was assault. She had to be a statue made of flesh and bone and righteous fury. "I am not resisting," Althea narrated loud enough for the gathering witnesses to hear. "I am complying under duress. I am informing you that you are making a false arrest." "You're done talking," Miller grunted, pulling his cuffs from his belt. The metal ratcheted shut around Althea's wrists. The cold steel bit into her skin. She was wearing a tailored wool blazer, and the cuffs bunched the fabric uncomfortably. It was humiliating. It was degrading. And it was all being captured by the camera mounted on Miller's chest, the unblinking eye that would eventually hang him. Just then, the construction crew returned from their lunch break. Jim, the foreman, a burly man in his 50s with dust in his beard, rounded the corner of the building. He stopped dead in his tracks. He saw his boss, the woman who signed his paychecks and approved his permits, in handcuffs. He saw a young cop pushing her toward a patrol car. "Hey!" Jim yelled, dropping his sandwich. Whoa, what are you doing? That's the director." Miller whipped his head around. "Back off. This area is a crime scene." Crime scene. Jim looked at Althea, then at the wall, then at Miller. "She's the boss. She's inspecting the mortar. We've been working here for 6 months. Are you out of your mind? Sir, interfere and you're next." Miller warned, his adrenaline spiking. He felt surrounded now. He felt like he was losing control, so he clamped down harder. He shoved Althea toward the back seat of his cruiser. Althea caught Jim's eye. She didn't look scared. She looked like she was memorizing details for a lawsuit. "Jim," she said calmly, "call the office. Tell them I'm being transported to the 4th precinct. Do not intervene. Just make the call." "Get in," Miller said, pushing her down into the hard plastic seat. The smell of the patrol car hit her stale coffee sanitizer and sweat. The door slammed shut, sealing her in. Through the plexiglass partition, she watched Miller storm around to the driver's side. He looked energized, pumped up. He thought he had taken down a belligerent vandal who was harassing a work crew. He sat in the driver's seat, breathing heavily. "You're in a lot of trouble, lady," Miller said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Destruction of public property is a felony when it's a historic building." Althea sat perfectly straight despite her hands being cuffed behind her back. She stared directly into the rearview mirror, meeting his eyes. "Officer Miller," she said, reading his name tag. "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I offered you my identification. I want you to remember that I pointed out the permit, because by the time the sun sets today, you are going to wish you had simply looked at the piece of paper on the fence." Miller laughed. He actually laughed. "Yeah, everyone's got a lawyer. Everyone's important. Sit tight. It's a short ride." He put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. Althea closed her eyes for a brief second, centering herself. She wasn't just angry. She was disappointed. She had worked for 30 years to build a city where the law was applied fairly, where systems worked for the people. And in 10 minutes, one arrogant man had shown her just how fragile that system really was. She began to count the blocks to the station. She knew the route by heart. She had approved the zoning for the precinct building herself. The irony was bitter, but Althea didn't have time for irony. She was preparing for war. The drive to the precinct took 12 minutes. Miller played the radio loud classic rock, likely an attempt to drown out any further lectures from his prisoner. He didn't know that silence was Althea's preferred weapon. She used the time to catalog his driving. He failed to signal a lane change on 4th Street. He accelerated through a yellow light that was definitely red by the time they cleared the intersection. He was sloppy. It fit the profile. When they pulled into the sally port of the 4th Precinct, the heavy metal doors rattled shut behind them, plunging the garage into artificial fluorescent brightness. Miller hauled Althea out of the car. Her shoulders ached. Her wrists were raw, but her spine was steel. She walked ahead of him, knowing exactly where the booking desk was. They walked through the double doors into the processing area. It was a busy Tuesday. Phones were ringing. Officers were typing reports. The smell of burnt coffee was stronger here. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Thomas O'Malley. O'Malley was the kind of cop movies were made about: thick gray mustache, weary eyes, 20 years on the job, and a memory like a steel trap. He was reviewing a file when the doors opened. "Got a 1094 Sarge," Miller announced proudly, steering Althea toward the bench. "Vandalism at the old library. Caught her scraping the walls with a knife. Claimed she was the director of planning or something." O'Malley looked up. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at Miller. Then he looked at the woman in the handcuffs. The color drained from O'Malley's face so fast it looked like a physical blow. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Miller," O'Malley said, his voice trembling slightly. "Miller, take those cuffs off, right now." Miller paused, confused. What Sarge? She was resisting. She was destroying the mortar on the... "Take them off!" O'Malley roared a sound that silenced the entire booking room. Every head turned. "Do you know who that is?" Althea stood there, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Sergeant O'Malley. How is your wife?" "Did the zoning variance for your garage addition go through last month? I believe I signed off on it." Miller froze. The key in his hand felt suddenly heavy. He looked from his sergeant to the prisoner. The realization hit him like a physical wave of nausea. The director comment hadn't been a lie. It hadn't been a delusion. You know her," Miller stammered. "Know her?" O'Malley came around the desk, moving faster than he had in years. He snatched the key from Miller's hand and unlocked the cuffs himself. "This is Dr. Gibson. She runs the city planning department. She approves our budget for facility upgrades, Miller. She practically built this station." As the cuffs clicked open and fell away, Althea rubbed her wrists. She didn't say thank you. She looked at Miller, who was now pale, his mouth slightly open. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow, sinking look of a man watching his future dissolve. "Sergeant O'Malley," Althea said, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room. "I need you to secure the body camera footage from Officer Miller immediately. I want the dash cam footage as well, and I want the precinct captain down here, now." "He's in a meeting with the deputy chief," O'Malley said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Get him out," Althea said. "Tell him that his officer just arrested the woman who decides if this precinct gets its renovation funding next year. Tell him I am currently standing in his booking room with bruises on my wrists because Officer Miller here doesn't know how to read a construction permit." O'Malley grabbed the phone. His hand was shaking. Miller took a step back, retreating toward the wall. He wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. The station, usually his fortress, had become a trap. Captain Robert Henderson appeared 3 minutes later. He burst through the office doors looking like a man who had been told the building was on fire. He was a tall man, usually composed, but his tie was askew. He saw Althea rubbing her wrist. He saw Miller cowering by the filing cabinets. "Dr. Gibson," Henderson said, approaching her with his hands up in a gesture of surrender. I don't even have words. I am so incredibly sorry. This is a misunderstanding of the highest order." "It is not a misunderstanding, Captain," Althea corrected him sharply. "A misunderstanding is when you bring me the wrong coffee. This was an unlawful detention, a false arrest, and a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. This officer refused to verify my identity. He refused to check the posted permits. He used physical force against a cooperating senior city official." She turned her gaze to Miller. He couldn't meet her eyes. He was staring at his boots. "I want a complaint form," Althea said, "and I want to file it right now, before I leave this building." "Althea, please," Henderson said, lowering his voice. "Let's go to my office. Sit down, have some water. We can sort this out. Officer Miller he's zealous. He made a mistake. We don't need to make this a federal case." "It already is a federal case, Captain," Althea said. "Because if he did this to me, a woman in a suit with credentials standing at a permitted work site, what is he doing to the teenage boys in this neighborhood? What is he doing to the people who can't call the captain out of a meeting? I'm not filing this complaint for me. I'm filing it for everyone else. He's stopped." She pointed to the camera on Miller's chest. "Is that recording?" "Yes, ma'am," Miller whispered. "Good. Save it. Flag it. If a single second of that footage goes missing, Captain, I will sue this department for spoliation of evidence, and I will personally ensure that the City Council reviews every dime of your operating budget." The room was deadly silent. The other officers were pretending to work, but they were listening to every word. They knew the hierarchy of the city. Police had power, yes, but the people who controlled the land, the zoning, and the money, they had a different kind of power, a slow, crushing power. "You have my word," Henderson said stiffly. "The footage will be preserved. Officer Miller, surrender your badge and gun. You are placed on administrative leave pending an immediate internal investigation." Miller's hands shook as he unholstered his weapon. He placed it on the counter, then his badge. The sound of the metal hitting the laminate was the only sound in the room. He looked at Althea one last time. There was no defiance left, just fear. Althea didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She filled out the complaint form right there at the sergeant's desk, her handwriting precise and neat. When she was finished, she handed it to O'Malley. "I expect a copy of the incident report by 5:00 p.m., she said. She walked out of the precinct the same way she had walked into the historic district that morning, head high, purposeful, unstoppable. She took an Uber back to the job site, retrieved her hardness pick from the ledge where she had left it, and finished her inspection. The mortar was indeed perfect. The fallout was swift and brutal. The body camera footage was released to the media following a Freedom of Information Act request filed by the local newspaper. The video went viral within hours. The contrast was stark, the calm, professional black woman citing municipal codes and the aggressive, dismissive young officer escalating a non-existent conflict. Public outrage was immediate. The comments section of the news sites exploded. "She's the planning director. How could he be so stupid? This is what we deal with every day. If she wasn't who she was, she'd be in jail right now." The internal investigation dug deep. It turned out Althea's intuition was right. Miller's personnel file showed a pattern, a disproportionate number of stops in gentrifying neighborhoods, a high rate of disorderly conduct arrests that were later dismissed for lack of evidence. He had a history of profiling people who didn't look like they belonged. He was a lawsuit waiting to happen, and the department had ignored the warning signs until he targeted someone who could fight back. 6 weeks later, the disciplinary hearing was concluded. Officer Kyle Miller was terminated for cause. His defense that he was protecting the neighborhood crumbled when the investigation revealed he had ignored 3 separate offers of identification from Althea. The bad apple argument didn't hold up when the public saw how easily the other officers at the scene had deferred to his aggression until it was too late. The city settled Althea's civil rights lawsuit for $450,000. It was a significant sum intended to make the problem go away quickly. But Althea wasn't interested in a quiet retirement. She took the entire check, every cent of it, and established the Gibson Historic Preservation Scholarship. The fund was dedicated to training inner-city youth in the trades of historic restoration, masonry, carpentry, stained glass repair. At the press conference announcing the scholarship, Althea stood at a podium in front of the old stone library. The sun was shining on the brickwork she had saved. She looked out at the cameras, at the community, and at the new recruits from the police academy who had been ordered to attend. "Justice isn't just about punishing the wrongdoer," Althea told the crowd. "It's about fixing the broken thinking that allowed the wrong to happen." Officer Miller saw a vandal because he couldn't imagine a black woman as an architect of this city. We are here to change that imagination. We are here to build not just buildings, but a future where competence is recognized regardless of who wears it. She looked at the young officers in the back. "Authority is not given to you by a badge. It is lent to you by the public. When you abuse it, you don't just lose a job. You break a trust. And trust, unlike brick and mortar, is very hard to tuck point back together." The story of Althea Gibson and Kyle Miller became a mandatory case study in the city's police academy. They called it the Gibson Rule: Verify before you vilify. It was a simple lesson, bought at a high price. Althea continued as director for another 5 years. Every time she inspected a site, every time she held that hardness pick, she remembered the weight of the handcuffs. It was a reminder that no amount of education, no title, and no suit could fully insulate her from the realities of bias. But it was also a reminder that standing your ground, knowing your rights, and demanding accountability could change the world, one officer and one precinct at a time. What is your biggest takeaway from this story? Do you think the settlement was enough, or should the leadership have faced consequences too? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe in justice and accountability, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth. Until next time, stay safe and know your rights.